Alright everybody, this is going to be a 2-minute tutorial just on the basics of the color picker in Procreate and most other graphics-based art programs, modeling programs, whatever you want to use. Specifically focusing on hue, saturation, and value, HSV, or, as you'll see in some places, I think even in Procreate, HSB, which would be hue, saturation, and brightness. Brightness and value are the same thing. Different programs just use a slightly different terminology. For whatever reason, doesn't really matter for our purposes. So when you open Procreate, if you haven't really messed with anything, and go up here to your color picker, you'll probably see this disk. This is their default setup here for picking different values or different hues or whatever. I like the classic one here. Because I like to mess with those sliders. Harmony is useful for picking kind of opposing complementary colors. And then you have a more precise slider mechanism over here. If you have specific colors you want to hit with a hexadecimal value or an RGB value, that's where you go. I like the classic. It's easy for me to see what's going on, but it's really down to personal preference. The three variables that I mentioned are hue, which is literally just what color is it? Is it red? Is it blue? Is it green? In this view, that is the top slider there. Saturation, which is how much of that hue is present in the color swatch you selected. So you can see my picker is going from left to or right to left or left to right there based on that slider. So over here, less saturated colors. Over here, most saturated colors. Full saturation is all of the value, none of the gray. It's not really shifted towards white or black at all. Desaturated has no color in it. No matter what hue I pick, anything that is fully on that left edge there is just going to be gray or black or white or some range in there. There's no color in it at all. No hue. Finally, we have the value slider, and if you're playing along at home, you've probably figured out this is simply white to black, also called the brightness, I can't say value, the brightness variable? Doesn't matter, it's white or black. So by combining these three things, I can very specifically pick any given color you want. I'm not going to get into RGB, CMYK, additive or subtractive color models because they don't really matter for digital painting. Those I can talk your ear off about if anyone really wants that video, but they only really matter if you're doing really specific things for production of physical goods or digital, editing or production for like final products, really. Where you really have to tightly control that kind of thing. For painting purposes and art purposes, it almost never comes up. Most of the time. There are some specific nuances and applications for especially CMYK for making prints, but most of the services most artists will use these days will just kind of handle that on their end. So you don't really need to get into it unless you plan on arguing with the manufacturer about it. And that's the point in the video where Apple's built-in recording app just froze. So there was about 3 more minutes of me talking to a frozen picture of a tree, but we're going to skip that part. The final point that I was simply going to make was that the reason I wanted to cover this for our future tutorials, both on the channel and on my Udemy and never courses that we're working on is because if you're painting in a realistic fashion, most colors that you'll see in most situations tend to be around 50% saturation or lower. And one of the #1 rookie mistakes I see people make when they're just starting digital painting and they're not used to like color picking and color palettes and everything is they start with these super saturated, super bright colors because it's like, I want red, I want blue, and then they can't figure out why it doesn't look right in a scene. It's because if you take a picture and use a color picker eyedropper on any given color, 99.99% of the time you're going to find stuff that's in the desaturated range. So just when you're putting your palettes together, focus on that. And that tree image that I used was a great example of that because I could pick the yellow leaves and show you that it was only about halfway up the saturation scale, so use your imagination there. I love painting on this thing, but God, every other app seems to mess up half the time. Alright, until next time.